By the way, it's fun to play with you, Solaris.
Oh, I enjoy you on the show. I just really enjoy it. And I love all your articles, by the way. It's very exciting. So, and I want to thank you for sharing your information, by the way. You have so much expertise in so many different areas. I really appreciate you, opening up to everybody. That's really nice. So thank you for that.
Book sales. Remind everybody.
All right, everybody, buy his books.
Yeah.
And what is your website again where they can get these books?
I'd like everybody to go to oak-publishing.com. My website, richardallanmiller.com, has links, but if you go to Oak, you'll get what you're looking for.
Excellent. Very good.
And I have several areas I write in. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's infinite.
And I've been writing a long time.
Yeah. You certainly have.
Time. I might have.
You're still doing it.
My first book came out 40 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Magical Mushroom Handbook. How'd that one work?
Oh, wow.
I wrote that one for High Times. So we did Legal Highs.
You remember the film? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you remember Altered States, the movie, right?
Oh, yeah.
So did that have any connection to you in your eearly days?
We had sensory deprivation tanks.
Yeah, I love those. I've been in float tanks. Those are great.
Yeah, well, they call them float tanks now. Back then, they're sensory deprivation. And
nice.
Yeah, and really, I think the strongest drug I've ever taken, and I've explored in laboratory and study things like BZ, the gas. I've done Jacob's Ladder drug.
What's that?
I think the most heaviest drug is sleep deprivation.
Right.
By the third day, you can hallucinate anything you want.
Hold on for a second. What's Jacob's Ladder?
What's that? Jacob's Ladder?
Yeah.
Oh, you haven't seen that movie?
I mean, is that a drug?
Huh?
Was it a drug?
Jacob's Ladder is a movie about a vet in Vietnam that was exposed to BZ, the gas.
Okay.
And he wakes up 9 years later on his way to work as a mailman, trying to figure out what's really going on in his life. And he goes to visit other of his old vet friends. Some are here, some are there, and they all are creepy about there's something awful going on. And it isn't until the end of the movie that you realize he's dying on an operating table in Vietnam, and the whole thing is a hallucination, just like now.
Mm-hmm. So
Jacob's Ladder.
Very interesting. That reminds me of Total Recall. You remember that one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mean the Arnold Schwarzenegger version of? Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, where he's on a mind trip and basically he's gone nowhere.
Well, yeah, that's the Matrix concept that everybody's trying to suggest, that we're in the future in a big vat hallucinating 20th century, 21st century.
What do you think?
What do I think?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first, the thinking part will get you in trouble because...
Well, I'm in trouble then.
Well, let's go there. It's more on intuition, your enteric or gut system. Mm-hmm. When you think, what your brain is for is to make true all your beliefs.
Right.
That's how it works. And so we've got magic in learning how to control that with direction and intent. And that's what we're talking about in terms of evolution of consciousness. Mm-hmm. The ability to control your thoughts and direct them like a tool.
Yep, like a laser beam, huh?
Well, one of the chapters in my books that I trained SEALs on power tools was belief systems. You know, the idea that if you were a staunch Christian and two aliens walked in the door, would you be able to see them?
Mm-hmm. Your
belief is why that in what the Bleep movie, it took the shaman to be able to see the ships out on the horizon, because the normal Indians didn't have any concept of a boat.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't see the alien spacecraft.
Right.
It's a metaphor. Your beliefs are what creates your reality, your thoughts, your actual thoughts. Yeah.
Well, that makes perfect sense. We manifest at will our reality, which is almost kind of creepy in a weird way, because when we stop manifesting, then what? We're in a vacuum?
Yeah, well, I'm. Stay tuned. I'll have that in my next.
All right, I want to know.
I don't know how to answer some of these.
Oh, that's okay. I'm rolling a lot of stuff at you anyway. But I will ask you, how long does the training for the Navy SEALs last? Is that a permanent, life-changing event?
what I did is I had a laboratory with half a dozen toys, and they would send groups of individuals through those labs, and we trained them. And we did some astronauts, not just SEALs. Nice. I did the first 3 units of SEALs, not SEAL 4, but I did 1 through 3, and we would train them on extrasensory perception. We would actually teach them how to live in metaphor. Mm-hmm. And most of the SEALs in the early years, the early ones, were not chosen for their strength or knowledge base of how to blow a bridge up or something. Figured we could probably train that in them. What we wanted was intuition. And what we wanted to do is take the most intuitive and then hone that into paranormal levels. Mm-hmm. And we would do that like with breathing, where we would teach them using breath control the ability to experience martial arts as Tai Chi when in fact they were moving in full combat.
Right.
Now, that is an altered state of consciousness that's not as firm, if you will, in certain aspects of reality, yet in martial arts, you had the precision of paranormal boxing. Right. That's what I meant by enhancements and using toys to get there quick that would normally take a lifetime.
Right. And what about changing your frequency? So are they altering their frequency in order to create a new space of consciousness? And then, of course...
Well, brain state frequencies. When you talk about frequencies, then I would work in terms of how you would use brainwaves to reprogram your parasympathetic nervous system for things like allergies.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. I know you've written about the synthetic telepathy, and of course I've experienced that. So tell me, what was your version of synthetic telepathy back then on that timeline?
In 1972, Dr. Carl Schleicher sent me an article from Business Daily News about Edward Marks and his works at the shipyards with microwave band. They had discovered that man had another sensory motor input other than sound and so on. It's microwave band. And it was explicitly in the 0.3 to 3 gigahertz. And what you could do is beam that at somebody, and it would cause their temporal lobes to heat up and ring. And once they started ringing, you could take the microwave band, and it's not hurting it. It's just, it's responding is basically what it was. And you could put heterodyne audio on top of that microwave band, and actually the subject could hear it in his ears, consequently now leading to targeted individuals or...
Right, and they've enhanced a lot of that. You know that right now, right?
Well, so here's the problem on that. Those devices that we developed in the early 70s are now, 40 years later, off the shelf for anybody with a dollar to buy.
Right.
I could, for example, harass you by taking a gutter, one of my gutters, and taking my home microwave and aiming it at your house.
Watch out, mister.
Well, I can estimate.
I know. Been there, done that, got it all.
Look, and Holly would, if she could. Trust me when I tell you, if they can do that, they're doing it. In fact, when we bombed Afghanistan after 9/11, when we went on the actual first ordnance, before they dropped any ordnance, bombs, rifles, bullets, whatever, was Commander Solo. And so that is what they used on the Branch Davidians. They used it on the second Iraq war. Didn't it seem strange when they would have 2 or 3 GIs in their M16s, and there was 200 Iraqi coming out of the bunker, all surrendering? Mm-hmm. How's that work?
Exactly. Mind control. Mass mind control.
Well, or suggestion.
Yeah.
Kind of like, how did the CIA put it? Mind control? No, we don't need mind control. We have TV.
There you go.
Well, there you go. Watch yourself.
It works really well, doesn't it?
Well, you can. I mean, it's amazing to watch how, like with neurolinguistics, with coding, you can pig lip somebody and slip a command in that they never heard.
Right.
Are you taking your bra off yet?
No, I'm sorry. I'm so blocked.
But that's what I meant. You can
I've been programmed already.
over the years.
What's that?
And that's a type of neurolinguistics, which is a very powerful tool. Mm-hmm. I mean, in terms of, I don't know, interrogation.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. Without a doubt.
Yeah. I'm trying to get down to the reals on it. And actually today, you can buy a voice stress analyzer to fit on your phone so that when you're talking to someone like you right now, I can tell whether you're lying or not.
Well, you know what, though? I can challenge you on that because with some of the technology I was exposed to, they have so much artificial intelligence interface that I can actually mimic the program so that you can't detect if it's a lie.
Well, that puts you up above a witch now. That's more like
I know.
Category. Yeah, good luck. And when you're in magic is when you've got the laboratory up in space beaming down at Scotty.
I call myself a mystical scientist these days. I don't know what else to say. But, yeah. My lights are flickering in my hallway right now, and I know that's you. So I just want you to know that.
Well, I try, the thing that's about is, Crowley said, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Now, what that means is that you're open and gracious to someone. Love is the law. Mm-hmm. You're open in front, unless love under will. Do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. What you end up doing is what you're supposed to be doing.
Right.
And that if you try to influence another person, that's like conflicting with their true will. And
I agree. So what about mind control? So there you go. So what happens with all these people that are getting interfaced or all these different directions these people are getting spun into? So what's going to happen there?
Distractions, trying to take your eye off the ball. Mm-hmm. And that's why they first do it with fear, like your fear of being broke, your fear of this, your fear of that, the fear of the beheading, and we're going to go over and bomb them out now. That's all about money. Look, the idea is that everybody knows what they should be doing, whether they've acknowledged it or not. And the problem is most of us are complacent. Mm-hmm. And we sit on the couch waiting for the rapture.
Yep.
Good luck with that. It's not going to come. You're going to have to go out and get it.
Right. And once again, that's the manifestation there, Richard. I mean,
it's not supposed to be easy, and you're not supposed to do it all like Simon says halfway to the door. That idea, it's a process. It's intentionality of the process. And that's what everybody gets. They're just a little lazy. And worse, they're also ill-informed and they're ignorant. Those are the three words that I hear used to describe America.
Well, I agree with you on that one, but it's also because they're not willing to learn. They're not getting up off their butts.
Why would they want to do that when they can have an anger issue and get food stamps?
I know. Well, isn't it sad? And then you're waiting on other people to ascend in consciousness so we can move on. And it's like, how can this happen?
I think that the first thing that we have to do is start with the importance of educating our children. Mm-hmm. It's a long haul step of teaching the children and then having them mentor the next level down so that there is a progression. And I think that the breakup of the family is what's put Mexico ahead of the United States. Mexico has a whole generation of children now that have no direction. Mm-hmm. And the unemployment, there's no drive to do something more. Mm-hmm. And that's because of depression, and why bother? It's all going down in a black hole. Anyway, and how does that graffiti say? There's no such thing as gravity. The earth sucks. Now, that place is not healthy. That will lead to illness, anger, and or unresolved issues like that are what causes aging. Mm-hmm. And it's as simple as that. And after so many exposures, you give up.
Mm-hmm. That's very, very true.
Well, it's okay. So you have a choice.
Yeah.
And that's the part that made you God's favorite. Mm-hmm. You have a choice to either do it this way or to do it that way. Yeah. And when you do, realize that your children are watching you and they're learning how to be neurotic just like you are.
Mm-hmm. And also,
fiduciary responsibility. You got to walk the talk. That's the deal.
All right, so let me ask you real quick, what about the transhumanism agenda, and do you think that that's going to alter the fate of the children?
Well, you mean Kurzweil and the our programs. Yeah, well, that suggests that by 2050, humanity no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I mean physically, emotionally, intellectually, that man does no longer exist. It'll be more toward a Borg hive consciousness concept.
I agree. Like an electronic human?
I'm sorry?
Like an electronic human, perhaps?
Well, they have 4 phases in the Avatar program.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is the upload into, just at the moment of your death, they upload your consciousness into a machine. That's Avatar 1 program. Avatar 4 is a living in a virtual reality that might already, as the movies The Matrix would suggest.
Right. That's almost creepy because when you transfer out, say you're transferring into a false matrix, then how are you going to know you're in a false matrix and how do you get out?
That's the part of the enteric nervous system and tuning into ESP and the relationship of that to consciousness. You'll notice your decision making from your gut allows you to live, whereas if you think with your brain, you'll get shot.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because your brain creates scenarios, plural, of one way I get out and one way I don't. That's the logic part.
Right.
Okay, well then if it's possible, it's probable.
Mm-hmm.
Very true. So if you work with instinct in your gut, that part of self seems to be outside space and time. And you always make the right decision. That's what we call spirit, like a wolf. They're closer to spirit than we are. What they do is absolutely what they're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pure energy and consciousness. They don't have programming like people do.
Well, but there are different levels of awareness. I have seen elephant depict a level of social awareness that humans don't have in the way they paint themselves and the way other people would see them as they're painting themselves. And I've seen dolphin. They have a language. There are mammals, in my opinion, that are more evolved technically than man. The orcas, that's where we came up with that fission bomb, was from the dolphin doing it as these little sonar bubbles. They blow a bunch of them and they form these rings and they play with them and they do whatever they do. And then when they let them go, the bubble goes to the surface, and just before it hits the surface of the water, it pops into white light. It was a form of cold fusion, and it was an art form for the dolphin. And there's higher on the food chain is orca, that has a cerebral cortex that's literally twice the size of man, and that mammal is firing 60% of his higher brain functions, where a man is only lucky to be doing 10% at any given moment.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
That cetacean, from my point of view, is God. Not my God, but capable of going places I will never know.
Yeah, they're like record keepers of the world or the earth.
Bad gorilla. You know, where that gorilla that they interviewed, I forget what her name was, they used in that movie Congo. That idea that these mammals have a sense of something more. So you can't tell me they don't have a soul. I've seen dogs that were, what are they? They're vegetarian dogs, and they're probably going to incarnate as humans next time around. I don't know that all.
Or beyond, actually.
Devotion. You know, animals have qualities that we aspire toward.
Oh, yeah. I tune into animals big time. Let me ask you a quick question here. I'm thinking about the atomic elements, and I'd like to kind of ask you, what is your impression of atomic elements triggered by frequency?
Well, that's what the laser light is doing to deuterium. It's turning it into a plasma.
Okay, so it's all about frequency, really, when it goes down to it.
Yes, vibration there. I'm giving it back to you.
Oh, you rat. Okay, let's do that. Vibration, oscillation, and frequency.
Yeah, no, I like the frequency.
That's okay. And did we cover teleportation, or did we just kind of on through that?
Kind of stepped aside.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second before we forget.
Well, let's hear it. You're all over the map with me.
That's all right. You're all over the map, so I'm just following you.
I know. In extrasensory perception, as Dr. Rind had envisioned it, we categorized qualities of something was either ESP or it was PK phenomena. ESP was inside the body being projected outward, whereas psychokinetic or PK phenomena was outside the body being projected inward. And that would include things like the Maharishi Mahesh Yoga and levitation, and Jack Schwartz, who was it? Aquarian Foundation. Keith Milton Reinhardt does apportations. He did at the Aquarian Foundation would in ritual pull gems out of his mouth. How did they do that? Where did they come from? Out of the ether or the ectoplasm or whatever. And so PK phenomena includes levitation, teleportation. Oh yes, and remote viewing, which is different than astral projection, which is ESP.
Can I ask you a quick question with the PK? Is that manufactured by an exterior source?
That's the soul's correct. That's why the research in the literature now on Emergent Mind Bulletin that's a zine on the internet by Leon Sidorov. He's Russian, and Matty Pitkinen, Alex Kavarinen, very famous scientists. My ex-wife and myself write for this thing. There are articles on remote viewing where basically what's happening is they're taking a viewer and enhancing him with drugs, and then he is allowing something to see him. And in quantum mechanics, we used to say that the observer observing something changed it, which means that something's changing the remote viewer. And so from that point of view, right out of the gate, it's dangerous. That is like a type metaphor of associating with demons outside of a circle.
And let me ask you real quick.
No idea. It would be the ghosts of Mars. It could be anything. Right. Observing you for whatever reasons. And
okay. I just want to ask you real quick. Is that is your representation that of the military's weaponization of remote viewing?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. All right.
That's with Ira Progoff and Ingo Swann and the usual suspects.
Right, and you're aware that they interface with artificial intelligence now to enhance the remote viewing.
I know that. Isn't that creepy?
Tell me about it. Yeah. We'll talk about that off air someday.
It gets weirder and weirder. Because
hey, I'm a test pilot, honey.
Don't do that, Solaris. You absolutely listen. Walt Disney knew to put a circle around himself.
Oh,
before you go
circles are too late for me. Like It's interesting, though. Walt Disney, isn't he? He's being frozen right now, isn't he?
Who?
Walt Disney.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I think they put him in.
It's not Mickey Mouse.
He's on ice, though. I mean, I think he's in a stasis, if I'm not mistaken.
Good luck with that. Well, it's all that acid he took.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to ask you
that question. No. I don't know about these off-tangent things with Walt Disney.
You know what's really funny? I'll mention something to you, and you know darn well. You know more than what you say. You're a possum.
Well, I'll
get it out of you. Don't you worry.
I know where my boundaries are. Is that a good thing? Really? And I have to be a scientist.
I know, and I like that about you. But you're a mystical scientist, too, because you embrace higher consciousness with... How can you be a scientist? You have to enhance it with mysticism.
I took too much acid in my early years. I'll tell you what happened. In 1964, I took my first hit of LSD with Timothy Leary.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And he came to Seattle. He interviewed with my mother, interviewed with my Professor Riggins at Pullman, and I'd never drunk alcohol. I never got high. I'm a nerd. And he took me. He was my guide. What it was a Harvard experiment. They wanted to see what would happen if they gave someone LSD that was a genius. They wanted to see what would happen to the consciousness. They thought it would enhance it. How did Jack Nicholson put it? Wait till they get a load of me. The Joker. Well, so we're up in Deception Pass, up near Hurricane Ridge. And I'm peaking. I've never, it's first did. It was LSD 25. Bill Osley made it, had a special. And I'm looking down 2,000 feet into the water, and it's peeling back colors and boiling and everything. And Timothy Leary leaned over and he said, "Wouldn't it be neat to jump?" And what happened next? Yeah, man. What happened next was that I saw all these different doors in my brain slamming shut. No, I don't want to go there. No, I don't want to think that. And I watched all of this in deep fascination. It was the doors of perception. They're real. And I discovered that inner space was more vast than even our vast universe. And that it's beyond anything we could imagine. And it's so rich and we're only using so little of it, that all of my works from then on were oriented around altered states of consciousness and its relationship to physics. And so today, when I taught shamanism in 1970, 6 years later, I was using John Curtis Gowan's trance, art, and creativity. He was out of Northridge. He had written a book called The Development of the Psychedelic Individual, and the psychedelic individual had nothing to do with hallucinations. This is a new term that was used in anthropology to understand what the different levels or jhana states or mystical states of experience.
Okay, let me ask you real quick. So psychic energy is separate from a hallucination, correct? Is that what you just said?
Psychic energy is kind of like a meta preform of energy. It's probably the structuring in water from a thought.
Okay.
That's probably what psychic energy really is. And a thought form is, in my ESP book, I lay down an equation on how that all works for how to increase extrasensory perception in your mind. To perform physically, be able to be beyond statistical inference. And time and the intensity of the concentration are the product of the two. Times the geographic constant, like if you're the Bermuda Triangle, where there are certain places on Earth that, right. Yeah, okay.
Let me ask you something. So the hallucination, is that a chemical reaction in the brain?
Hallucination. No, it is a filtering of information into conclusions.
Okay.
And that we're constantly hallucinating.
I was going to say, what about all these people that they say are crazy who are hallucinating? Then technically they're not crazy.
When I taught at Evergreen, I wrote a movie. I helped write a movie called, it's a cult classic now. It won Best Picture in Cannes. John Papagianni did the movie. It was called Eat the Sun. The second part was Then You'll Be Your Own Father.
Nice.
And basically, it was about a new religion based on biofeedback. And the premise, the concept that I had was that your body is in conflict with itself, and that's what you experience as reality. And that if you could use electronic feedback systems to put the brain in harmony with the heart and that kind of thing, that you would then know the unknowable truth. Now, it was a movie. It was just a science fiction movie. However, then the military had made spend another 6 years on video feedback systems to actually make that concept a reality. And that led to the work I did with Navy SEALs. And right now, today, I have gotten to a place where I've written 3 books. They're called The Diamond Body, Electromagic, and Yogatronics. And basically, I can take any sound, I can take, using sound and light in pattern form, I can reproduce any drug experience using sound and light. And that's because of the way you gate information. I encoded that and how it releases specific neurotransmitters and how they dialogue with other ones. And that was called electromagic, using German acupuncture equipment where I had little pulses going on the brain that I could talk to neurotransmitters, and I'd use light. Yogatronics.
So you actually had to wire people up?
Yeah, there you go.
But nowadays you don't have to do that.
Well, it's in, yes, that's correct. They do color and dating systems for subliminals all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that taking it to the next level, you can do all kinds of spin. You know, that there's a group of Christians wrongly suggesting that the Lemegeton or Guisha is being used by Satanists on TV to control the masses using occult symbolism. I read all that nonsense. And it may or not be true. What is true is that Satanism only exists in Christianity. It's a perverted form of Christianity, certainly, but it doesn't exist in anywhere else. And the only reason we were in Iraq in the first place was because of the Yazidi and the book that was called The Sacred Traditions of the Yazidi. It was on devil worship, and it was about the idea that there was a pre-Christian devil-worshipping cult that exists in the northern part of Iraq. And really, because that was not possible anthropologically, what was happening is it was believed that there was an artifact up there, which later was described as a Stargate. And actually, it was written by the Catholic Church back in 1919 when they first started talking about it. During my tour with MRU, we knew about it, but we didn't know where it was. And it wasn't until the first Bush went into Iraq and didn't get it. And that's why the George W. Bush went in after we had tomography. They identified where it was in the caverns. It was down about 60 miles in the earth. Yeah, and what it is, it's a Stargate. I have no idea what it really does. I can only guess because in the Yazidi it says, it talks about demons that would come and go through this doorway.
Do you know what it looks like?
As a side, I'm just going to give you one final little tip here. As a side, the Yazidi also say there's a second Stargate. And just like in the Stargate movies.
I know.
But nobody knows where it is. I suspect from the work I've done, it's somewhere in the Indian Ocean. These are big artifacts that apparently are just like in the movie where you can go through a wormhole, inertialess. I know that Boeing right now has a magnetic monopole and has had that for some time. And on domed craft, what they're doing is either 3 or 4 magnetic monopoles for stability. The 4 is harder to tune, and it's also better working. What they needed was something that could go from 0 to Mach 60 instantaneously with no gravity. And the way they do that is using a cavitation process. Now, I didn't explain this earlier, but here's how a cavitation process works. You have a pool of water, and I drop a drop of water down to the pool. As the drop hits the pool, it pops back up, or it appears to pop back up. It pops up and pops up and pops up. And that's because when it hits the water, it sets out a standing wave going out, but it also sends a standing wave going in, and the two waves slap each other and cause a thin film of water to surround the air. And that's what goes back up in the air. Now, that cavitation, that's called cavitation. Like when a submarine goes through the water and there's from the rotor, there's all these bubbles that are going behind it. Those are cavitation bubbles and determine a signature on how we identify what kind of a sub it is and that kind of thing. Now, what they're doing is that if you look at it closely, the water film is called easy water. It's H3O2 and forms a structure around the air that's inside it. And the air inside it is turning inside out on itself, like a torus. And the actual toroidal surface, and this is what they're doing now, by the way, with deuterium on a nanometer level as a weapon. So the technology is easily understood, but what they're doing with it, here's the bad news about fullerenes. Fullerenes, for example, what the Russians are doing with it is that they're giving lethal doses of radiation to rats, and feeding it fullerene water, that fullerene water acts as a super antioxidant, and there's a 95% recovery from lethal doses of radiation. And you'll notice you don't hear anything about that. What you're hearing about is, thermal weapons, tactical nukes, that kind of thing that used in Baghdad's airport. That was, all of that is technology that has a variety of different things. That's why the NASA document is suggesting that by 2025, the whole thing hits the wall, and by 2050, it's like a extinction event. Fukushima, this geoengineering right now, in my opinion, is even now potentially a worse threat than Fukushima, which has already been predicted as an extinction event. That's why the Kurzweilians are into the Avatar program, because that's our way out of here.
Right. Well, let me ask you a quick question. Now, with that being said, what about activating an internal Stargate at the cellular molecular level within?
The diamond body, a face-centered cubic hexagonal close-back structure. Now, it turns out that's Ezekiel's vision. It comes out of Merkaba mysticism.
There you go. I knew you were going to say Merkaba. I know that well.
That's what you wanted.
You speak my language.
Yeah, the throne chariot of God. It is a visualization in your mind's eye that if you can do that properly, you have a spaceship and a time machine. Excellent. There's your TARDIS. It is a visual in your mind's eye. That's how it works. What it does is it sets up resonance in the brain with glial cells and their preferred pathways. When you're born, come out of the womb, and the doctor slaps you, and you scream because you're angry and mad. That's the first neurologic circuit that's born. It's a noradrenaline, serotonin, fight-flight syndrome. And what happens is we have preferred pathways in the brain that evolve and become your subtle body. And if you can, it's like a little geometry. It's a resonant package thing that Ezekiel saw. Ezekiel's vision. And, how that works is that if you, in your mind's eye, can envision this geometry, you can change time and space. Just like that. And if you don't think the military isn't using that, that's why my books aren't published yet. It's still a little... that's all work I did at the University of Washington. I'd had this big bukla. They didn't have, it was an emu. It was an emu, not a bukla. It was an emu. And it was a big laboratory. And at the end of my research, I had an audience of 100 people. And just by flashing colors and strobing it like a retina light circus kind of thing, I could make, at any given moment, 90 of the 100 people all stand simultaneously having to go to the bathroom.
Wow.
I had that kind of autonomic control on their biological processes using light and sound.
Oh, my goodness. What about transmission?
About what?
What if you were to interpolate that or recreate it into a transmission when that, where you didn't have to have people in the room?
That's called cloning emotions in your P300 waves. That's what that's all about, is to... what cloning emotions is when they will do a brain fingerprint on you. It's a P300 wave. And then superimpose, let's say when you're depressed, and then hit you with microwave with that depression, and you will sink right back down into those same sinkholes.
Right. How do you alter those?
I'm certain of it, yeah.
How do you alter those frequencies? So say somebody's getting hit with some of this stuff. How would you change the frequency? Is there some kind of a device you can use to broadcast it away?
Yeah, your will. That's why it's good. That's how it works.
That's what I've been doing.
The man is responsible for the thoughts he chooses to entertain, whether they came from your inner self or they came from outside you. You can, and that is the purpose of meditation and training the mind.
Makes perfect sense to me. So they have an obsession with harnessing a demon of some kind, you say? With the Stargates? They were looking for some kind of a...
No. They were using it as a way to go from here to there without having to go through the Van Allen belt.
Okay, so where's the Stargate now? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you don't. Do you know, but you can't tell, or do you just don't know?
No, I don't know. I'm old and grumpy, and I'm out of my secrecy clearances, and I would love to see one. It's like, yeah. But no, I don't know where it's at.
Okay, well,
the other one might be in the Indian Ocean if anybody wants to go treasure hunting.
Well, let me ask you something. Do they look like the ones in the movie?
I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Okay, but they are artificial.
I'm going to guess that it has something to do with it looks like water, but it isn't. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with the way you restructure space.
Oh, that sounds
That's
so cool.
what we call a wormhole. And listen, that's the distinctional difference between Stephen Hawking, and his black hole concept, white hole, mm-hmm. and Roger Penrose and his torus twistor space. They're very similar models of how the universe works, but I tend toward Roger Penrose and a holographic system that I use. Mm-hmm. And so Penrose didn't do holographic concept. That's me. But his math is very useful as an alternative on how I, lens from one level of resolution to the next. In a holographic system, everything's broken into memes like physical, emotional, intellectual, archetypal, microtubule. It goes up and down. That's what my book outlines. But that's why EQ, emotional, is considered a higher form of IQ, mm-hmm. because it has more detail.
That makes sense. And have you heard that they're talking about that there's no such thing as black holes now? It's mathematically not possible. Have you heard that?
No, there's always going to be with the Higgs boson and all the Higgs, the stuff that they're discovering now, the God particle, whatever. Mm-hmm. There are new models, but nobody knows. And really, I don't know of any law in physics that's lasted longer than 20 years. Mm-hmm. Maxwell's right-hand rule of thumb qualifies, but pretty much physics goes through a gigantic enema every 20 years in mm-hmm. terms of, and to have a theory of everything, good luck with that. Basically, the theory of everything is probably the study of consciousness.
There's a question for you by Amit Jin in the chat. It's called, how many Stargates do you know of?
I know of one and the possibility of a second one.
Okay.
That's according to the Yazidis book, the Devil Worship.
Why do you think they were over there instead of closer here?
Iraq, I don't know. I don't know.
That's interesting. I'm wondering.
I have seen artifacts in laboratory. Things that were obviously not human, but they don't have to be necessarily not human. They could have been from another civilization of man. The Nazis were always seeking out lost technologies, and trust me when I tell you that lost could have many faces. For example, there was a race of humans that escaped the flood. They're discussed in the Bibles that went into Middle Earth, down deeper in the earth, and that might be your gray. Mm-hmm. Just because they're have no pigment. I don't know. I don't know. What I do know is my physics, and my primary expertise was paranormal, and that I can talk, in terms of what I know and what I don't know. Oh. Mostly it's a bunch of hooey. Every once in a while, we run across something that is repeatable and reproducible, and we don't know why, because we don't know what the variables are. Uri Geller, he could stop watches and bend spoons and things like that, and then I caught him cheating. Now, does that mean that everything is wrong that he was doing? No, but because I caught him cheating, all that concept of research was thrown out.
Well, how did you catch him cheating, if you don't mind me asking?
He hung out with a bunch of wealthy old bats, and they always were, encouraging, will you break my watch for me, please? I just step on it. But what he would do is, he couldn't do it at will. It would happen sometimes and sometimes not. It was Andrea Puharich that brought him into the forefront. And basically, he started cheating to please the women and his ego.
Right.
And he got caught. Bummer. Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't do it, but it threw all that research away. Great Randy.
Right.
Now, there's a piece of work, man.
Yeah.
His thing, well, he says that he can duplicate any event that would appear to be paranormal using laser main. And he has this $1 million challenge. And so I was just going to go have a couple of my students that use ESP to win the lottery, see how that works for them.
Cool. So that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm always wondering if those guys don't have some kind of an implantation that makes them a little more psychic or enhanced, and they just don't talk about it.
They're just more devious and have read a lot of books on the best flim flam man was Nikola Tesla.
Oh, I like Tesla. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Personalities through history get modified by, like I know that history, the way it's written in history books aren't right because I personally have been to Antarctica. I've seen the Nazi base.
So I want to hear about that for a second. All right. So tell me about it.
Well, okay. So that was one of the projects that I was taken on where I wasn't lead. I was basically part under a woman. And my job was on the bioluminescence. They wanted to know how the light was. There's this cavern in Antarctica up near I don't know what side it is there. At one time, there was a hole where they bombed out the Nazis in the 60s when Kennedy was running. But basically, they've covered up now. There's this huge cavern down below that is like a mile high. And it has weather. And it's light in there. That's what my job was, is to figure out how come there was light. It was a form of bioluminescence. There's a mold thing that grows down in this cavern because of the moisture. There's hot springs and everything there. And I was talking about that. I think it was on Red Ice. And some guy called me from England. He was 10 years older than me. I'm 70. He was 80, and he was part of the Royal Air Force that went in on the mopping with, I guess it was Russia and America. The three countries went in to try to take out that Nazi base. And he said that when they bombed it in the 60s, that there were some Germans that escaped. They actually went down into deeper caverns.
Interesting.
And the reason I figure we're not speaking German today is they ran into something down below them that stopped that nonsense.
Or did they have was there maybe a Stargate there where they could actually go someplace else?
I don't think it's down there. The Stargate was originally in Iraq. I don't know where it is.
Could they manufacture one, maybe replicate something similar and be able to bilocate off-world?
I don't know how that technology works to make comment on that part.
Okay.
I don't know that technology. I don't know it. What I know is what I know. I know how the neutron bomb works. I guess because we have one and they're using it. That's the creepy part. Everybody knew they were going to, at some point, have a neutron bomb, and then we never heard about it anymore. They used it on things like 9/11, probably.
You think they're still using it now?
Oh, yeah.
On what? What would you say?
Mostly Israel. That's where I'm seeing the vectors a lot. Okay. You can see it in geoengineering where they'll laser some of these weird cloud formations that they've made, and you'll get a thermal explosion. You'll see it on NOAA infrared. I've posted some stuff, and it'll be under the Easy Water paper.
Okay. That's good that we want to check that out. Well, so there is a signature involved with those.
Oh, yeah, you can see it. It's, it was, there's no question. They set one off last month over the state of Hawaii, over the Big Island, and then a second smaller one in Maui. When that big before the hurricanes, it was, there was a tropical storm that was coming right straight to the Big Island, and then it veered off to the north and was like most storms, petered out. And right when it was starting to peter out, there was a simultaneous explosion over the Big Island and Tennessee at exactly the same moment. It was precision. Two beams, boom. And that was what caused that weird weather pattern in Tennessee and Hawaii. And then there was the collateral damage of those earthquakes. What they do is they have a bacteria that creates, it's a nanobot bacteria that creates a nanobot. It creates a polymer structure that they line with barium oxide. And when it acts as a desiccant, and it pulls moisture out of the sky, out of the air, and into these artificial clouds. And what happens next is these wispy clouds start to hang in formation, and because of the water in them, the way it is, and the density of it, they act as waveguides for a Star Wars weapon. And they can direct the beam anywhere they want to. And what they'll do is build up a series of deuterium, fullerene-held deuterium, and then they'll hit that with a laser light, and it will cause an explosion. But the explosion isn't a boom explosion. It's a heat explosion that pulls moisture out of everything into a big vortex. It creates a storm.
Wow.
And it's a new they call it a geo bomb. And the bad news is when it rains and snows, that particulate gets down into everything, including our bodies. And most likely is micro dehydrating everybody. And so we'll see a rise in sickness statistically because most people will think that they're hydrated and they're not. That's
interesting. So is that a satellite-driven thing or no?
Yes.
It is.
It used to be done with HAARP, and now it's done from satellite.
Yeah,
that's how quickly the technology. When they closed HAARP down is when they pretty much, it isn't really closed, by the way, but when they stopped using HAARP, they started using a laser beam from space.
Wow. So what about electromagnetic pulse weapons? They don't use those anymore to like induce earthquakes or?
Well, that will be an old-fashioned way. There's that'll be an old-fashioned way. They've got new technology that are more efficient.
Yeah, it sounds like it, huh?
Yeah. It's kind of, I don't know. What I want to do is say to you that with all of this stuff going on, what you can do personally is concern yourself with yourself. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about your neighbor. Your neighbor may or not make it. In fact, that's a good thing to do. Get to know your neighbor because that's going to be the person that probably saves your life. It's going to be down to neighborhoods. When the grid collapses, and it will at some point, the whole issue will start with water and then go downhill from there. And that's why they have FEMA camps right now, because basically everybody is inequipped to produce their water. Even though it's all around you, there'll be all kinds of weird sicknesses from that.
Sounds like it.
The primary illnesses is dehydration and exhaustion. Those are going to be what kills everybody. It won't be radiation and a black plague or some weird thing, Ebola. It's not even Ebola that they're doing. It's that zombie drug that was developed in Russia to take out China, and they became partners and they put it on the shelf. And what they're doing down in Sierra Leone is weapon systems.
Right. You're right about that. Gosh darn, I wish we had more time. We're getting ready to wrap this up. Let everybody know how to get in touch with you and also your websites one more time.
Yeah, okay, sure. Thank you, Solaris.
Thank you.
I'm at oak-publishing.com and or richardallanmiller.com. And Allan is A-L-A-N. And I'm easily gotten through email. You can find a submission form, send it to me. I respond to everybody. So, You're
awesome. Yeah, please pick up his books and support Dr. Richard Allan Miller. What a pleasure it's been to have you on. I'm so excited to have you on. Please come back. I want to talk more about all this stuff. It's just fascinating. It's spin my wheels in all sorts of directions. It's really good. So is there anything else you want to add? I think we have maybe just a few more minutes before we...
Well, just realize that everybody's watching what you're going to do now. And Europe and all of their advancements are watching to see what America is going to do right now. And this next month, the petrodollar is going to crash and burn. And truly, there's going to be a real serious problem in the banking industry. And how you choose to go through this will be, whether or not we pull it off or not. And I think that, there'll be blood, but I think that we're going to be able to, somehow I think what we're going to see is a bunch of retirement homes turning into kibbutzim.
Interesting. Well, you sound like you're in a good place right now, where you live.
Where? Oh, in Oregon, yeah.
Yeah.
This is Copland with bunker heaven. A little bit of hillbilly heaven, yeah.
That's all right. It's probably better than being in a big city somewhere, right?
Yeah, I forgot. We have a rail gun, too.
Maybe you could work on a teleportation device and we could just kind of get out of here.
Well, Castaneda called that bilocation.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, being in two places at once.
Or I'd rather just teleport. I don't think I want to be here and there.
Yeah, well, that's that book, Into the Out Of. Check it out.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. Once again, I want to thank you so much for being on tonight. It's been a pleasure. And real quick, we'll probably run out of time. Oh, we did. Darn it. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. And thank you again, Dr. Miller. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to Revolution